Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Storytime with Miss Peggy. As you can see, I'm trying out different places in the house to do this recording. Mostly I need someplace with good light and a good internet connection. So I'm sort of shopping around to see, and you'll have to just tell me in the comments whether you think that this one is better or worse than the others, or which one you like better, because I really don't know. I'm on one side of the camera and you're on the other. But let's not talk about that anymore. Let's go on to chapter 7. Now, in chapter 6, some exciting things had happened. Let's just read the last few words of chapter 6 and remind ourselves of what was going on. At that moment, the door was suddenly flung open. Aunt Letty looked around and saw with amazement that an enormous woman, splendidly dressed with bare arms and flashing eyes, stood in the doorway. It was the witch. And chapter 7 is entitled, What Happened at the Front Door? "Now, slave, how long am I to wait for my chariot?" said the witch. Uncle Andrew cowered away from her. Now that she was really present, all silly thoughts he had while looking at himself in the mirror were oozing out of him. But Aunt Letty got up at once from her knees and came over to the center of the room. "And who is this young person, Andrew? May I ask?" said Aunt Letty in icy tones. "A distinguished foreigner, a very important person," he stammered. "Rubbish," said Aunt Letty. And then turning to the witch, she said, "Get out of my house this minute, you shameless hussy, or I'll send for the police." She thought the witch must be someone out of a circus, and she did not approve of bare arms. "What woman is this?" said Jadis. "Down on your knees, woman, before I blast you." "No strong language in this house, if you please, young woman," said Aunt Letty. Instantly, it seemed to Uncle Andrew the queen grew to an even greater height. Fire flashed from her eyes, and she flung out her arm with the same gesture and the same horrid-sounding words that had turned the palace gates of Charn to dust. But nothing happened, except that Aunt Letty, thinking those horrible words were meant to be ordinary English, said, "I thought as much. This woman is drunk. Drunk, she can't even speak clearly." It must have been a terrible moment for the witch when she realized that the power that had turned people to dust in her world was not going to work in ours. But she did not lose her nerve, not even for a moment. Without wasting a thought on her disappointment, she lunged forward. She caught Aunt Letty around the neck and the knees, raised her high above her head, as if she had been no heavier than a doll, and threw her across the room. While Aunt Letty was still hurtling through the air, the housemaid, who was having a beautifully exciting morning, put her head in the door and said, "If you please, sir, the taxicab has come." "Lead on, slave," said the queen to Uncle Andrew. And he began muttering something about regrettable violence. "I really must protest." But at a single glance from Jadis, he became speechless. She drove him out of the room and out of the house, and Diggory came running down the stairs just in time to see the front door close behind them. "Jiminy," he said, "she's loose in London, and with Uncle Andrew. I wonder what on earth is going to happen now." "Oh, Master Diggory," said the housemaid, who really was having a wonderful day, "I think Miss Ketterly's hurt herself somehow." So they both rushed into the drawing room to find out what had happened. If Aunt Letty had fallen on bare boards or even onto the carpet, I suppose all her bones would have broken. But by great good luck, she had fallen onto the mattress. Aunt Letty was a very tough old lady. Aunts often were in those days. After she had had some smelling salts and sat still for a few minutes, she said there was nothing the matter with her except a few bruises, and very soon she was taking charge of the situation. "Sarah," she said to the housemaid, who had never had such a day before, "go around to the police station at once and tell them there's a dangerous lunatic at large. I will take Mrs. Kirk's lunch up myself." Mrs. Kirk, of course, was Diggory's mother. When Mother's lunch had been seen to, Diggory and Aunt Letty had their own. After that, he did some hard thinking. The problem was how to get the witch back to her own world, or at any rate, out of ours, as soon as possible. Whatever happened, she must not be allowed to go rampaging around the house. Mother must not see her, and if possible, she must not be allowed to go rampaging around London either. Diggory had not been in the drawing room when she tried to blast Aunt Letty, but he had seen her blast the gates at Charn, so he knew their terrible power and did not know that she had lost any of her powers by coming into our world. And he knew that she meant to conquer our world. At the present moment, as far as he could see, she might be blasting Buckingham Palace, where the Queen lived, or the Houses of Parliament, where the government was. And it was almost certain that quite a number of policemen by now had been reduced to little piles of dust. And there didn't seem to be anything that he could do about that. But the rings seemed to work like magnets, thought Diggory. If I could only touch her and then slip on my yellow, we'll both go into the wood between the worlds. I wonder if she'll go all faint up there again. Was it something that place does to her, or was it only the shock of being pulled out of her own world? But how am I going to know? I suppose I'll just have to risk that. And how am I going to find the beast? I don't suppose Aunt Letty will let me go out, not unless I told her where I'm going. And I haven't got more than 2 pennies in my pocket. I'll need any amount of money for buses and trams if I go out. If I go out looking for her all over London. Anyway, I haven't the faintest idea where to look. I wonder if Uncle Andrew is still with her. So it seemed in the end that the only thing he could do was wait and see if Uncle Andrew would come back. And if they did, he must rush out and get hold of the witch and put on his yellow ring before she had a chance to get into the house. That meant that he must watch the front door like a cat, watching at a mouse's hole. He dare not leave his post even for a moment. So he went into the dining room and glued his face to the window. It was a bay window from which you could see the steps up to the front door and see down the street, so that no one could reach the front door without your knowing. I wonder what Polly's doing, thought Diggory. He wondered about this a great deal as the half hours ticked on, but you need not wonder, for I'm going to tell you. She had gone home late for her dinner, with her shoes and stockings very wet. And when they asked her what she'd been doing, she said that she had been with Diggory Kirk. Under further questioning, she said that she got her feet wet in a pool of water, and that the pool was in a wood. When they asked her where the wood was, she said she didn't know. Asked if it was in one of the parks, she said, truthfully enough, that she supposed it might be a sort of park. From all of this, Polly's mother got the idea that Polly had gone off, without telling anyone, to some part of London she didn't know, gone into a strange park, and amused herself by jumping into puddles. As a result, she was told that she had been very naughty, and that she wouldn't be allowed to play with that Kirk boy any more of the sort if that sort of thing ever happened again. And she was given dinner with all the nice parts left out, and sent to bed for 2 solid hours. It was a thing that happened to one quite often in those days. So while Diggory was staring out of the dining room window, Polly was lying in bed, and both were thinking how terribly slowly the time was passing by. I think myself I would rather have been in Polly's position. She only had to wait for her 2 hours, but every few minutes Diggory could hear a cab or a baker's van or a butcher's boy coming around the corner and think, "Here she comes," and then find out that it wasn't. And in between those false alarms, for what seemed hours and hours, the clock ticked on, and one big fly, high up and far out of reach, buzzed against the window. It was one of those houses that gets very quiet and dull in the afternoon and always seems to smell like roast meat. During his long watching and waiting, one small thing happened that I shall have to mention, because something important came of it later. A lady called with some grapes for Diggory's mother, And as the dining room door was open, Diggory couldn't help overhearing Aunt Letty and the lady as they talked in the hall. "What lovely grapes!" came Aunt Letty's voice. "I'm sure if anything could do her good, these would. But alas, poor dear little Mabel, I'm afraid it would need the fruit from the land of youth to help her now. Nothing in this world will do much." They both lowered their voices and said a lot more than he could hear. If he had heard that bit about the land of youth a few days ago, he would have thought Aunt Letty was just talking without meaning anything in particular, the way grown-ups do, and it wouldn't have interested him. He almost thought so now. But suddenly it flashed on his mind that he now knew, even if Aunt Letty didn't, that there really were other worlds and that he himself had been in one of them. At any rate, there might be a real land of youth somewhere. There might be almost anything. There might be fruit in some other world that would really cure his mother. Oh, you know how it feels when you're hoping for something that you desperately want badly, and you almost fight against that hope because it's almost too good to be true. But you've been disappointed so many times before. That was how Diggory felt. But it was no good trying to throttle this hope. It really might be true. So many odd things had happened already, and he had the magic rings. There might be worlds you could get to through every pool in the wood. He could hunt through them all. And then Mother well again. Everything right again. He forgot all about watching for the witch. His hand was already going into the pocket where he kept the yellow ring, when all at once he heard the sound of galloping. "Hello, what's that?" thought Diggory. "Fire engine? I wonder what house is on fire. Goodness, it's coming here. Why, it's her." I don't need to tell you who he meant by her. First, there came the cab. There was no one in the driver's seat. On the roof, not sitting but standing on the roof, swaying with superb balance as it came full speed around the corner with one wheel in the air, was Jadis, the Queen of Queens and the Terror of Charn. Her teeth were bared, her eyes shone like fire, and her long hair streamed out behind her like a comet's tail. She was flogging the horse without mercy. Its nostrils were wide and red, and its sides were spotted with foam. It galloped madly up to the front door, missing the lamppost by an inch, and then reared up onto its hind legs. The hansom cab crashed into the lamppost and shattered into several pieces. The witch, with a magnificent jump, had sprung clear just in time and landed on the horse's back. Look at this picture. There's Jadis on the roof of the hansom cab, which is, of course, a horse-drawn taxi cab in those days, since automobiles hadn't been invented yet. And there's the lamppost behind. It was lit with gas, not electricity. But anyway, there we are. Doesn't she look magnificent up there? She settled herself astride the horse and leaned forward, whispering things in its ear. They must have been things not meant to quiet it, but to madden it. It was on its hind legs in a moment, and its neigh was like a scream. It was all hoofs and teeth and eyes and tossing mane. Only a splendid rider could have stayed on its back. Before Diggory had recovered his breath, a good many other things started to happen. A second cab dashed up close behind the first. Out of it, there jumped a fat man in a coat and a policeman. Then came a third hansom cab. Hansom is Hansom, and it's the way you spelled the word for a taxi cab in those days, which was a horse-drawn carriage. All right. Then came a third hansom cab with 2 more policemen in it. And after that came about 20 people, mostly errand boys, on bicycles, all ringing their bells and letting out cheers. And last of all came a crowd of people on foot, all very hot with running, but obviously enjoying themselves. Windows opened up in all the houses of that street, and a housemaid or a butler appeared at every front door. Everyone wanted to see the fun. Meanwhile, an old gentleman had begun to struggle shakily out of the ruins of the first hansom cab. Several people rushed forward to help him, but as one pulled him this way and another pulled him the other way, perhaps he would have gotten out just as quickly on his own. Diggory guessed that the old gentleman must be Uncle Andrew, but you couldn't see his face. His big hat had been bashed down over it. Diggory rushed out and joined the crowd. That's the woman, cried the fat man, pointing at Jadis. Do your duty, constable. She took hundreds and thousands of pounds worth of jewelry out of my shop. Look at that rope of pearls around her neck. That's mine, and she gave me a black eye, too, and more. Aye, that's her, governor, said one of the crowd, and as lovely a black eye as I'd want to see. Beautiful piece of work that must have been. Ain't she strong, then? You ought to put a nice piece of raw beefsteak on it, mister. That's what you need, said a butcher's boy, hoping to sell him one. Now then, said the most important of the policemen, what's all this here? I tell you she's, said the big fat man when someone else called out. Don't let the old guy in the cab get away. He put her up to it. The old guy in the cab was certainly Uncle Andrew and had just succeeded in standing up and was rubbing his bruises. Now then, said the policeman, turning to him, what's all this? Came Uncle Andrew's voice from inside the hat. None of that now, said the policeman sternly. You'll find this is no laughing matter. Take that hat off, see? This was more easily said than done. But after Uncle Andrew had struggled in vain with the hat for some time, two other policemen seized it by the brim and forced it off. Thank you, said Uncle Andrew in a faint voice. Thank you. Dear me, I'm terribly shaken. If someone could just give me a small glass of brandy. Now, you attend to me, please, said the policeman, taking out a very large notebook and a very small pencil. Are you in charge of that there young woman? Look out, cried several voices, and the policeman jumped back just in time. The horse had aimed a kick at him, which would probably have killed him. Then the witch wheeled the horse around so that she faced the crowd, and its hind legs were on the footpath. She had a long, bright knife in her hand, and had been busily cutting the horse free from the wreck of the hansom cab. All this time, Diggory had been trying to get into a position from which he could touch the witch. This was not at all easy, because on the side nearest to him there were too many people, and in order to get around the other side, he had to pass between the horse's hoofs and the railing of the fence that surrounded his house. If you know anything about horses, and especially if you'd seen what state that horse was in the moment, you would realize that this was a ticklish thing to do. Diggory knew a lot about horses, though, but he set his teeth and got ready to make a dash for it as soon as he saw a favorable moment. A red-faced man in a bowler had now shouldered his face to the front of the crowd. Aye, policeman, he said, that's my horse what she's sitting on, same as it's my cab what she's made matchwood of. One at a time, please, one at a time, said the policeman. But there ain't no time, said the cabby. I know that horse better than you do. 'Tain't an ordinary horse. Its father was a officer's horse in the cavalry, he was. And if the young woman goes on exciting him like that, there'll be murder done. Here, let me get at him. The policeman was only too glad to have a good reason for standing further back from the horse. The cabby took a step nearer, looked up at Jadis, and then said in a not unkindly voice, Now, missy, just let me get at his head and you get off. You're a lady and you don't want all those roughs going for you, do you? You want to go home and have a nice cup of tea and lay down quiet like, and then you'll feel ever so much better. At the same time, he stretched out his hand toward the horse's head with the words, Steady, Strawberry, old boy, steady now. Then, for the first time, the witch spoke. Dog, came her cold, clear voice, ringing loud above all the others. Dog, unhand our royal charger. We are the Empress Jadis. And that's the end of chapter 7. Next time, we'll read The Fight at the Lamppost, Chapter 8. Thanks for being with me today. Bye.